Thank you for joining us on this call. My name is Brian Marvel. I'm president of PORAC. Before we start this, I'd like to have a little disclaimer. This call is being recorded, and we'll make sure to send out a link after the event for your future reference. Joining me today are Vice President of PORAC, Damon Kurtz, and your Region 1 executive members, Barry Donnellan with the Oakland POA and Paul Kelly with the San Jose POA. Your time is incredibly valuable, and even more so during this crisis, so I definitely want to thank you again for taking the time out to be on this call. As we mentioned in the email invitation that went out, we're going to begin with a brief update before we get into the question and answer phase of today's meeting. Before we take any questions, if you're using the Zoom app, you can click the raise hand icon on the bottom left of the Zoom window. You'll also be able to see the hand icon turn green. That way it'll help me identify people that have questions. Let me begin by saying we're faced with an unprecedented challenge, and our law enforcement community wants you to know we are your partners in addressing this challenge and containing the COVID-19. Law enforcement agencies throughout California have deployed teams of officers to go above and beyond their call of duty to aid their communities during this crisis. We're helping to deliver meals to seniors and at-risk youth. We've assigned officers to grocery stores and new emergency shelters to ensure people feel secure. Some of our law enforcement agencies have moved to longer shift, canceled training and vacation time to make sure that our staffing is appropriate to meet the needs of our communities. Peace officers support all first responder calls, and I think this is important. You have to recognize when somebody calls 911 and reports a fire, and a medical emergency request, or a welfare check. I would say by and far, peace officers respond to those calls, and usually we're the first ones on scene. While there's a heightened need for officers across California, we've had a number of law enforcement officers test positive for COVID-19, and many more who have called in sick due to the symptoms of COVID-19, but who have not been tested. Along with our doctors, nurses, and food providers, our officers play an essential role in responding to this crisis, and we too are feeling the strain on our resources. Our objective today is to provide you with a brief overview of the resources we need to ensure we can continue to proudly serve our communities during this difficult time. As you know, preventing the spread of COVID-19 is the primary objective of this nation, and it's ours as well. Essential personnel must continue to show up for work or at greater risk both of contracting and spreading the virus. To keep our officers and those we serve safe during this pandemic and to help contain it, we are in urgent need of additional personal protective equipment, which you've probably heard as PPE. Right now, we have officers in the field that either have no masks or only one. Officers are having to choose between wearing their mask or offering it to an individual they're interacting with. Our officers are running low on disinfectant that is needed to properly clean their vehicles and equipment between calls. I recently came in possession of a national law enforcement report. Law enforcement, which includes jail facilities and court security, will need approximately 11 million N95 masks, 11 million disposable gowns, 11 million eye protections, 23 million gloves, and almost 2,300 gallons of disinfectant. One of our second priority is testing. We're trying to secure expedited testing sites for first responders showing symptoms or who have encountered an infected individual. We recognize that we have limited tests available across the nation and within our state. However, our law enforcement officers come in contact with some of the most at-risk citizens on a daily basis, the homeless and elderly. We cannot keep these populations safe if our officers are unknowingly carrying or transmitting the COVID-19. I recently read reports where people can be asymptomatic with the COVID-19 virus, which puts more people in jeopardy if our own officers don't even know they have it. Seen in Seattle and Chicago about first responder only test sites. Sadly, in Chicago, when they opened it, they ran out of their test kits within 4 hours. Seattle's had the greatest success to date, and they were the first. California must establish designated COVID-19 testing sites for first responders throughout the state. Been told to me via the governor and our website that was created by the state, there are 22 health labs with testing capabilities. Recognizing that it will take time to establish these sites, high-risk regions with the greatest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases should be prioritized first. Third, and more of a midterm priority, is to establish COVID-19 as a presumptive occupational illness to be covered under workers' compensation. As peace officers and first responders are essential personnel, they are exempt from California's shelter stay-at-home order and are significantly at higher risk for contracting the virus in the course of their duties. Should any officer or first responder contract the virus while performing their duties, we believe this qualifies as a work-related illness that should be covered by workers' compensation. With that said, we are currently working with the governor's office and the pro tem's office to draft language and have it reviewed to either do it via an urgency legislation or through an executive order. With the testing, we want to make sure that we have a quarantine space for our officers who test positive or need to be quarantined to determine whether they have the virus or not. As officers are risking their health and safety in the course of performing their duties, we must make sure that they have a safe place to go if they do come down with the virus or need to be quarantined. The governor is currently providing homeless individuals exhibiting the symptoms of COVID-19 with the purchase of hotels. We looked into the hotel occupancy rates, and it shows that they're hovering around 10% statewide. We believe similar arrangements can and should be made for peace officers serving our communities, especially those that have families. One of a longer-term priority is vaccinations. As I mentioned, keeping our community safe requires that we also keep our officers safe. We recognize that a vaccine is being worked on, and hopefully one will be out very soon. And when it does, we want to make sure that our public safety first responders are on the priority for receiving it, or if there becomes a medical protocol that mitigates the effect of COVID-19, we want to make sure that we're on the priority list for that one too. So in closing, I want to emphasize that our officers are ready to do everything in their power to support our communities during this crisis, but they also need your support as they rise to meet this moment. We're asking our state and federal elected officials to introduce urgency legislation and support an executive order by the governor to help ensure our officers have the resources they need to show up for our communities during this crisis. While an executive order may preclude the need for urgency legislation, we're asking that our elected representatives pursue both courses until we have a viable path forward to getting our officers the resources they need. Now I would like to turn it over to our region representatives.
I'm going to turn it over to Barry, if he could talk a little bit about what's going on in the Oakland area. That would be fantastic. But I have to find him. There he is. I'll unmute you. Hey, Barry, are you there?
Yeah, good afternoon, Brian, and thank you for having me on. So, unlike Paul in Santa Clara County, we have less of an outbreak in Alameda County, but it's still significant compared to the rest of the state. Internally at the Oakland Police Department, we have 3 officers who have already tested positive and for COVID-19. And I just checked before I came in here, we have 96 exposures amongst the officers. And unlike most departments, we have dedicated testing for first responders, for firefighters, police officers. And this afternoon, they expanded it out to the city employees who are on the front lines with us. And I can't tell you how successful that is in keeping the operation going. It reduces quarantine time. It keeps officers in the operation running. And it provides some solace to the officers and their families so they know which way they're going as far as being at risk, or in the case of the 3 officers that we already had, actually contracted it. And it's a invaluable resource that's, it's certainly speeding up our ability to respond to issues in the community. And it also, while we have 3 confirmed cases, we're able to respond to those cases very quickly and determine where they came from and trace it back to what radio call they went on, or in fact, in one of our cases when it was an individual arrest. As far as personal protective equipment, we're in need of it. We're not completely dried up a bit. There's a real concern for how long this will go and whether the city stockpiles are going to be depleted. And obviously, in the long term, making this a presumptive for first responders, I think, is a necessity, given the fact that this could go on for a considerable period of time.
Thank you, Barry. I had one additional question before we move over to Paul. How is your department dealing with the executive order in regards to enforcement of that?
Enforcement is very challenging. The enforcement on the ground is challenging enough for us. We have seen a reduction in our calls for service, but unfortunately, we haven't seen a reduction in our actual crime. So officers have been given guidance from both the police department and from the district attorney's office as far as enforcement is concerned. But as far as we're concerned, realistically, it's an education and awareness campaign in between calls for the officers that are out there. And that would be where we're at as far as enforcement is concerned at the moment.
Thank you, Barry. Paul from San Jose, could you talk a little bit about the testing that you were able to set up for your department and maybe for the county?
Yep, absolutely. Brian and others, thanks for your time, first off. So initially when this outbreak happened and we started to pay attention to it, I think a little bit more seriously in our county, Santa Clara County, one of the first things, once we started to get some exposures and some potential COVID-19 infections, is that I want to say we had to wait in line, and officers were not able to get the tests. They had to quarantine. And at that point, they didn't know, obviously if they could come back earlier, if they were a negative, and be able to get back to the street, maybe 3 or 4 days after instead of 2 weeks. I got to be honest with you, we're very fortunate in Santa Clara County that we were able to, I want to say, negotiate it, because that's kind of what happened. And when I've talked to other union leaders, not only in California, but across the nation, is it's very few that there's actually a system in place, a priority testing, or what maybe some people are calling a fast track for the testing. And so far it's worked out very well. We contact our EOC if we believe someone needs to be tested, have to be symptomatic. Our county is saying because of the false negatives, when you're asymptomatic, it's not done, and that's how it's written up, which we actually agree with based on all the facts that we're getting. If I can, Brian, I just want to say one thing. We talk about the things we need during this phone call. We talk about the things that are important to protect our citizens throughout California. Just some contingencies that I'd like to just highlight, which is really important. It's facts and stats for us. You have basically a little over 1,300 cities in the entire state of California, San Jose being number 3. Just to give you an idea of how bad or potentially bad this can be, and not that the sky's falling, but to really prepare if our officers get sick. San Jose is going to be fortunate because we're so large, but the smaller agencies are not. And with roughly a 30 or 40% loss of our staff, which it looks like it may be that way as the weeks go on, the response for calls for service will increase. To give you an example of domestic violence where someone's getting assaulted, could take up to 30 minutes to even get there if they're lucky. Our detective bureau will be depleted. Child assaults, sexual assaults, homicide, robberies. There won't be detectives in the bureau in San Jose. They'll be on the street. Our special operations unit will not be working special operations. They'll be on the street. And I just got word today that our academy's canceled. Our next academy is canceled, and the one in October is going to be canceled. And on an average in San Jose, we're getting 100 people leaving every year. And this will do anything but get us forward in regards to what needs to happen on the street to keep our citizens safe. So it's not a doom and gloom. Those are just the facts. These are responsibilities in the city of San Jose that we've highlighted. Our chiefs have gone over it with our Office of Employee Relations. And I think that's really important as we discuss about PPEs, priority testing, presumptive, that our law enforcement officers, boots on the ground, get out there, do what they need to do every single day, but have the support of legislators, knowing that it's going to get a lot worse for us out on the street, including fire, including our medical people in the state, been doing a phenomenal job. But I think you really have to look ahead 3, 4, 6 months of how these agencies are going to be depleted in these cities. And the small agencies may not even have a cop running calls for service. So without the things I think we're asking for and really think that are important to keep our officers safe and the community safe, number one, are vital.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Out of respect for everyone's time, I know we said we would keep this under 30 minutes. I will go ahead and open this up to any questions from our elected leaders or their staffers. Any of them? Did you want to say something, Randy Perry?
Yeah, sure, Brian. Hey, I just want to be very clear. We have been working with the Pro Tem's office on language for a police and fire. We have also been working with the governor's office and seeing if we could get it through an executive order, because we are unsure when the legislature is coming back in, and this needs to occur quickly. So we're working with both sides, seeing whatever we could do quicker, and that's the strategy right now. Also, in terms of the testing and testing sites, I know that PORAC is actively out looking for tests. We have been in contact and communication this afternoon with an East Coast company that has perhaps 1 million tests, with 5 million coming within the next 2 weeks. So we're trying to do what we can do to bring that into Sacramento and California, I'm sorry. And then finally, if we can get the test, we would like to ask the governor's office and the Office of Emergency Services, the legislature, whomever, if we could set up testing sites for first responders in various parts of the state, so they could literally go there, get tested, and know whether or not they are carrying the COVID-19. The last part of that is there's a lot of discussion about using the vacancy rates in hotels right now for folks to use, such as the homeless and the like. But our officers are also asking if we could do some kind of a program where we could negotiate with hotels where if an officer does test positive, they could go and stay at a hotel instead of going home and infecting their families. So that's something else that we're working on right now, is what we've been doing for about a week now.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate that. Any other questions from anybody on the call?
I actually have a question. I'm from State Senator Glazer's office, and I just want to know, has there been an increase of officer departures, or will there be an increase of officer departures because of COVID-19? If you're not familiar, I am actually an officer with the San Diego Police Department, and I just received notice. We have a private pension. We're not part of CalPERS. They are so overwhelmed with retirement applications that they're having to do webinars, and the webinars are filling up faster than they can schedule them. So I think you're going to see this as a statewide issue, maybe with outside of public safety, but just maybe general all public employees. But that's just my firsthand experience with my department. I'm glad you brought that up, though, because that'll be a question that we'll ask in the next survey that we're sending out. Thank you.
This is Senator Jerry Hill. This is Jerry Hill. I have a question regarding San Jose's canceling of their academies through October. Why would they go out that far? Do you know?
Paul, yes, are you still on the line?
Yeah. Am I muted?
Yes. No, go ahead, Paul.
Yes, sir. So what happened now is because of some of the requirements for posts, our current academy, which just started, has canceled. The upcoming one that was set because of the same requirements, you have to do self-defense. You have to do a lot of close contact stuff that they wouldn't be required, or they wouldn't be able to actually get through the classes and the tests that were satisfied posts. The October one, that's a great question, is because of backgrounds and medicals and all the precursor stuff in order to get those people in the academies is not being done for two reasons. One, staffing with San Jose and probably anybody else, there's no one doing backgrounds right now. It's completely dropped off. There's no one doing medicals. There's no psychs. There's no polys. There's nothing. And because of that, the projection is, even if we get up and running, it's going to be too late to get that October academy. Now, if we can, we will. But at this point, the meeting today showed, depending on when our counties and our state opens up, to be able to have these sort of testing processes prior to the academy, we may be able to, but it was not real positive today. So that's the reason, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
This is
Appreciate it.
Member Bauer Cahan. I just want to follow up on that. Randy, are you looking into if we can make some changes to post requirements in the short term to try to allow, since I'm hearing a lot of people saying we can't bring anyone on, we make temporary post changes to allow that?
Rebecca, I didn't hear the question.
Actually, if I could, Assembly Member, if I could answer that for you, I have been in contact with Manny. He is the CEO or Executive Director of Post. We're trying to figure out alternative ways to facilitate all the post requirements in regard to what post requires officers to get through the police academy. With that said, they've analyzed a lot of the requirements. They're codified in state law, so it would require the legislature to make some changes in the way that posts can then either find ways to do online training, and then figure out a way where, like defensive tactics, there's a block of defensive tactics. There's EVOC, the driving of the vehicles, obviously, and the first aid stuff. To be able to address that, I could definitely put you in contact with the Post Commission, and maybe we could come up with some solutions on how to figure out how to handle that. I can tell you that outside of agencies, police agencies that have their own academies or affiliated with academies, all the other colleges are closed down. So in law enforcement, we get a lot of people who pay for their own police academy, and then they try to hire on with the department. Those folks are like completely done. We have an employee here who's trying to become a Contra Costa County Deputy Sheriff. She's doing it on her own. Her college has been shut down, so she can't compete. So we're open to working with anybody to figure out how Post can make it to where we can get people through the police academy. I think it's a very valid point that you brought up, because I think the pipeline is going to dwindle very quickly, and I think the onus is going to fall on bringing these retirees back to come to work.
Right. Well, let us know if we can help with that.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, it's about 3:56. Like I said, I really wanted to keep this under 30 minutes. I'll open it up for one more. Anybody have questions? No? All right. Well, I want to thank all of our elected leaders for the leadership that they've shown in addressing this with the governor. We're extremely grateful to work with you. Please use PORAC as a resource. Like I said, we have 920 affiliates in the state of California. We want to help in any way that we can. So please be safe and have a fantastic day.